How you doing, guys? Mr. Coleman here, Whitmore High School. Just want to show you how to create the trench that's going to hold your marble for your dog clamp. Now, very simply, just want to go through the difference between cutting with the grain and against the grain. So against the grain is going across the piece of wood here, and with the grain is going up and down. So you can actually see the grain. Now, the reason why we're doing this is I want to show you how it's easier to cut with the grain rather than against the grain. So I'm going to get a chisel and I am going to make a series of cuts going across the wood against the grain. The wood does not want to split easily, whereas if I was to put it in the vise and I was to go with the grain, I guarantee you that the wood will split very easily for me. So there you go. You've now got two pieces of timber from one. If you go with the grain, the wood will split easily for you. This is with natural wood, pine wood. Now, I'm going to show you how to mark out the trench for the backing piece. Very simple. What I've done is I've got a template. I made it out of cardboard boxes. You're going to use your datum point, which is here, to show it to you. You're going to make sure you mark it in symmetry on both sides. Just going to turn the camera so that you can see this properly. Reason why you must mark it in symmetry is because you need to have two reference points so that you can see it when you're cutting it with the coping saw. Off it up to the top edge. Make sure you're not going wrong. And check with one of your friends. Make sure that it's right. Okay, so that's the outside section. Very easy to process that using a coping saw and a tenon saw if needs be. Now what I want to create is a trench on the inside. Now the trench is going to house the marble. We're going to have a deep end which is going to be higher in the product, and we're going to have a shallow end that's going to let the towel grab into the actual trench, and that when you move it across, it'll be able to release the towel. So with one of my templates, I have points cut in to the template, if you see them there. D stands for the deep end and S stands for the shallow end. Now what I'm going to do is going to get a center punch, or maybe you might have a pencil or something like that, and you mark in the points. Afterwards, you tick off your template and you join up the points. If you do not have a template, the length of the trench is going to be about 70 millimeters long by a width of 25 mil. Now that may be handy for you because there's 25 mil chisels, but if you don't have a 25 mil chisel, you can work with your 12 mil chisel. Mark in my deep end, mark in my shallow end. Okay? Now to process this, I cannot use the vise because, as you've seen earlier, if I cut with the grain in the vise, it'll split because the bottoms of the fibres of the natural timber wood are not supported and they will tend to split. I am going to process this as a square or a rectangle, because when I am using the chisel to create the trench, I'm going to need to use a bench hook. Now this here is a bench hook. You'll see them left on the windows in both of the woodwork rooms. It's a sacrificial piece of timber. It's a very strong piece of timber, and what we're going to use this for is to wedge the actual timber up against, so we can process it. Very useful for cutting, very useful for chiseling. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my chisel. Now the chisel, which fell on the ground, I'm going to use my chisel to create a cut in the fibres going with the grain. Now, I could also use a marking knife, but if I'm very careful, I can get a tri-square and cut with the chisel, the side of the chisel, using my tri-square. So that's created a cut, severing the fibres with the grain. Now I also want to make a cut on the deep end using the chisel. Now the chisel has got a bevel and it's got a straight side. Now I want to put the straight end against the deep end, and I want to make one short stab at it with a mallet just to break the fibres. To take the chisel out of the wood, I'm going to hold the head of the mallet on the wood and pull the chisel out. I move over to the other side. Okay, next part. If I'm physically strong, I want to use the chisel like this, off the bevel. As you see, the bevel there is the angled part. Now, if I want to use my own strength, I'm going to go off the bevel. I'm actually not going to use the angle to cut. I'm just going to use it on the straight on the back. I'm going to push forward with the bench hook in front of me. Make sure I don't put my hand there, because if I do, I'm bound to cut myself. It's actually quite hard to push forward. But if you really force your shoulder into it, you'll be able to cut well. Now look and notice my finger orientation, where I'm putting my hands. I'm making sure I don't put my hand there, and I'm pushing forward. Notice that my fingers are on top of the blade, and I push forward with my hands. And this is quite strong wood, so what I'm going to use is I'm going to turn the chisel blade on its angle, on the actual bevel. If you just notice it there. So I'm actually going to put the angle down, and this time with the mallet I'm going to process the trench using the mallet. And that splits the fibres evenly so that it doesn't split out the back of the wood. Now, I like the song We Will Rock You. It's very good. It is just around the right tempo of the way that I like to process this. So I'm going to stand up properly and I'm going to process this joint. So when I'm using the mallet, I'm on the bevel. Not using the mallet, I'm off the bevel. The bevel is the angle. I'm going to pick up some of the wood in my hand and pull it out. And then on the sides of the trench, I'm going to turn the chisel sideways and force with the grain. That looks like a very accurate ramp or trench section. The shallow end meets the front surface, no problem. There's one more thing I need to do. I need to make sure that I don't go out the bottom of it. So what I can do is I can get a small little bit of masking tape, use the chisel to gauge how far that I want to go down, use the masking tape with the chisel, put it into the depth of the trench. That's how far I want to go down, and as you see, it nearly meets it there.